the key problem, as always for me, has been the billion people in India who are not receiving even primary health care. One of the reasons we had to go to lockdowns and so on is compared to the Western world, we are about have 5 times less, 1/5 as many beds, maybe 1/10 as many doctors, and as many, even the nurses. The statistics are staggering. And I've always wondered why we have these restrictions. Why don't we have many more medical colleges? Why don't we produce many more nurses? Why don't we have hospitals? And it occurred to me, everybody wants to live in cities and they don't want to go to villages. And therefore, the billion people don't need all these doctors, can't use them. And therefore, we don't produce them. It's kind of silly, but that's the life, basically. And so I would like to address the question of, if we set to ourselves, we want to provide universal quality healthcare, how can we provide it? So I'm putting myself in a little village, where I come from, where there are only about 500 people still, maybe 1,000 people by now. And what problems do they have every day? They have problems like headaches and stomach aches and fever and acid reflux, because they eat a lot of spicy food. And that's one class of problems for which it's easy, if there was any kind of local medical clinic, they could get appropriate things and they don't have to suffer as much. The same is true for emergency medicine. People in villages have snake bites and they have cuts and fire. Some people get, and occasionally you fall off from this tree and break your bones. So those kinds of things currently can actually be locally done, and they're not. And finally, there are a set of chronic problems like blood pressure, diabetes, and sleep apnea, and other such things. I'm not talking about serious problems like tuberculosis and malaria and so on. Basically, there are enough people that have this kind of problems. And finally, if you kind of review the quality, we did a screening of the students, for about 6,000 students. 10% of them had hearing problems. 10% of them had eye problems. 10% of them had, dental problems. 5% were anemic. So all of these things are chronic. Basically, everybody has them and they don't know what to do. They just go through life, not being able to see clearly or not being able to hear clearly. And that is the situation we're in. So I'd like to see if we can come up with Public Health Foundation, some universal solution that can actually be afforded. The issue is we need to create scalable, sustainable, and autonomic solutions. Scalable in the sense it cannot be, immediately, scaled to the entire billion people. We need to somehow come up with solutions where we test it at a village level and a city level, at a constituency level and the district level and the state level. So gradually go there so that you're debugging the system solution step by step. So so scalable solution, development of scalable solutions is one of them. Sustainable solution, if the solutions we come up with are very expensive, it will never happen because there is no money. So the issue is, what are the sustainable solutions we can think of? And there we have to kind of come up with low-cost solutions. The government already provides free medicines, except most people don't know how to get them. And so the whole issue is every man and woman and child should have basic health care, should have a right to basic health care. Finally, the solutions must be autonomic. It's like your heart. It beats even whether you ask it to beat or not. You cannot wait for somebody to somehow come and do it for you. Like this is where waiting for a bicycle doctor or a motorcycle doctor is not good enough. We need to be able to say, if I have some problem today or this evening, I should be able to send my son or daughter to the local clinic and get a solution. So the question is, we need to come up with low-cost alternatives for this thing. So I'll come back to this problem. So there are 3 or 4, maybe half a dozen topics I'd like to talk about, which are population scale problems. One of them is pandemics, right? We are still going through the pandemic, infectious diseases, and they're always going to be there with us. It turns out there are new sensors, smart sensor watches, which will not only measure your temperature, oxygen level, heart rate, breathing rate, blood pressure, and so on. You can also use them to do a survey saying, are you having aches and pains? Are you having any other kinds of problems? Not using the watch, but the smartphone that goes with it. So once you have that data at a population scale, this would be fantastic. Now the question is, we can't afford it yet. That's where the sustainable solutions come in. The cost of one of these devices with a smartphone and a smartwatch is about $100, maybe $120. So to provide 1 billion people with this, it's $100 billion. However, this year we are expecting GDP loss of 9.6%, $288 billion out of a $3 trillion economy. So compared to the loss we occurred in this 1 year, you could afford to give every person in India one of these smartphone watch combinations, and at 1/3 of the cost. And so we need to kind of look at the relative efficiencies of how to do these things. Then there are a number of other topics I want to quickly talk about. We now have the AI technology so that you can get instant medical advice in a native language, like Siri and Alexa voice assistant technology. There was a very important scheme at the national level called RBSK, Rashtriya Bal Swasthya Karyakramam, which had an ambitious goal of screening everyone from birth to 18 years old every year. When I heard it, I said, you're never going to do it. You're talking about screening 300 million people. There's no way you can do it. You have not even organized to do that kind of thing. So finally, my predictions came true. They're only screening people at birth. That's it. And that's not a bad thing. And that brings me to the next point. However, I think we should at least do one more screening when the people are about 12 to 15 years old, one more. And that's about 30 million people. Every person should be screened. And if they have a problem, like vision problem or dental problem, that's where you need a motorcycle doctor to come and fix the dental problem. And the vision problem can already be checked by locally trained medical technicians or teachers, so that if they need a pair of glasses with Amazon-style supply chain management, you can get the glasses to them within 24 hours. That's all it will take. You can do that. And so anyway, there are a number of solutions of that kind. Finally, there are three more I want to talk about. U5MR is under 5 mortality rate. About 1 million people die every year before they reach 5 years old. This is a national global metric everybody follows. 50 years ago, when I first looked at it, that number was abnormal for India. It's over 110 or 120. We were close to Africa, which has 300, and Afghanistan and other countries also have 300. And I said, what the hell? We are a developed country, even in 1960s. How come we have this kind of thing? Because we were not organized to screen at the birth all the problems that they were having, and the problems that many people die for diseases that are possible to clean. They die from infections, they die from pneumonia, and they die from diarrhea and dehydration. All of them are easy to solve. So if I have a problem like that, I'm a mother, my son is having diarrhea, dehydration, I should be able to get instant medical advice in my local language instantaneously, and then say, I know what to do. And that kind of thing is currently not available. Everyone already has smartphone, they can get it, but it is possible to do. So the last two are very important for population scale service, primary healthcare, emergency service and mobile hospitals. Ramling Raju of Satyam Foundation had the vision about 15 years ago to start these things. And to his credit, the emergency service is now running in about 2/3 of the country. And where it's not running, even where it's running, it has become bogged down in politics. Again, this is the kind of thing that should be under Public Health Foundation or somebody who says emergency medicine is a national right. Everybody should have it. And we should figure out a way of doing it. The only problem was when it is done under a public sector, there are all kinds of problems come in. People don't show up there to drive the ambulances and so on. So you need a public-private partnership. And that was what was great about 108 and 104 solutions. They also had a mobile hospital, which is not, they might have been able to do Srinivasa's motorcycle solution, but at that point, they had a whole ambulance with 5 people going around from village to village, and they demonstrated you can do that. It's not a major cost. You need about 33,000 ambulances, okay? So the question is, how do we provide rural healthcare infrastructure? And what I'm also saying is, there's a fortune to be made there. That is, these billion people, even if they're only spending $2 a day, is $2 billion. Maybe 5–10% of that is for healthcare. And the issue then is, how do we provide them? My proposal is we create a new medical degree called 8th grade MBBS. That is, I claim I can train 8th grade students who just graduated, if they're smart, and many of them are pretty smart, to train and give them an 8th grade MBBS, where they're trained and they stay in the village and can provide local medical help. And that's what I think we need to be doing. And then we can then augment them with experts at call centers or motorcycle doctors, whatever else we want. So this is basically the model we may want to create for infrastructure. And finally, I'd like to kind of propose the universal healthcare in the future should be through self-help. You cannot expect the government and other people. And I believe, Srinivasa talked about expert systems. I believe we can create enough autonomic voice-based medical expert assistants who will carry on a dialogue with you and tell you what you need to do and how to do it. It's not enough to say, oh, you have diabetes, you need to do something. You have to manage, they have to be able to say, we will get you the medicines. Whatever you need, we'll get it for you. And that kind of thing, will make it unnecessary to have a labor-intensive solutions. Self-help tools, medical expert systems using voice-based things, because I'm assuming many of these billion people can't even read and write, and therefore they can only speak in their local language. So we need to develop the technology and capability for providing those things. And we also need the concept of digital literacy and personal hygiene. And this is something you have to teach in the primary school. And not to say, oh, digital literacy, that's something you have to only get in postgraduate degrees. Everyone can be taught basic minimum digital literacy and how effectively use smartphones and how to search for things and how to find things and all of the other things. And personal hygiene, what people have learned during the pandemic, wearing masks and washing hands and a few other things can be taught, and the issue then is rapid access to medication. We need to set up instant, infrastructure, supply chain, like in Amazon, so that I can get my medicines within 4 hours. Even if they're not in the village, the nearest town is probably not more than about, uh, 10 miles or maybe 1 or 2 hours away. And if my child is dying from dehydration, whatever medicines that might be needed besides simply feeding them water, they're kind of not able to retain. You can actually get to them within 3-4 hours, and that is the key. Finding rapid access to medical solutions. We understand that technology. Amazon does it. The whole, we are getting, all kinds of things, groceries delivered within 4 hours or less, and food and everything else. So finally, there's a very interesting talk I recommend that you might want to look at. It's called, let children do dangerous things. Let them play with fire. Let them, jump into the water, and if they don't know how to swim, and let them, deal with knives and things. And when you listen to it, they're not asking you to do dangerous things. You need to teach the children, when you have fire, what are you going to do? How are you going to deal with it? If they don't practice it, if they don't have training in it, they will never know what to do. The same is true, with respect to burns or anything else. So with that, thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Dr. Reddy, we have a question from the audience. This comes from Ramalingam Ramkrishnan. His question is, how do we increase the productivity and the
Excuse me
quality
1
of...
second.
Yeah.
I need to see the question because something needs to be done. Stop sharing. We don't need to do this. Now you're going to show me the question. Oh yeah. How do we increase the productivity and the quality of the outcomes of doctors and nurses using AI? Increasing the productivity. One way of doing that would be wherever a smartphone agent can do 80-90% of what the doctors are called upon to do, then their productivity will increase by a factor of 10, right? But in general, if I don't want to be flippant, we need to aim towards solutions in which almost all routine stuff does not need intermediation of a doctor or a nurse. And the question is, how do we get to those solutions? That's where I think Dr. Sriniraju and Dr. Vijay Narayanan and I should have a triple IT call to decide what are the next steps on how to create that medical infrastructure. We believe we can, but improving the productivity of doctors and nurses is one way. The second is to create a second tier 8th grade MBBS rather than a postgraduate MBBS or something, who can actually be taught a lot of things at the primary care level in, I believe, 6 months to 1 year. They're not going to be ever perform surgery and all kinds of complex things, but simple, surgery. If you have a broken hand or a bone, they should be able to set it, and they should be able to even stitch, major cuts and burns and so on. And that can be taught to 8th grade MBBS. And so those are the options, I think.
Thank you, Dr. Reddy. We have one more question coming from Neha, and I'll post it again. So it goes as in a country where digitization in public health system is yet to kickstart full-fledged with quality open data sets. How do we see all of this coming true? Artificial intelligence, machine learning, IoT.
Yeah, you can. The minimum requirement to benefit from AI is you have to have at least a smartphone. The question is, half the people in the country don't have smartphones, and they're all mostly in the villages. If you're in town, you somehow beg, borrow, and get yourself a smartphone. But people in villages, not only that, many of them can't read. Not read English, but they can't read even local language. And so the development of voice assistants that can speak to you in your local language, that technology has been demonstrated. We know how to do it. We have done it in many languages like English and Chinese and Japanese and German and French, but not much has been done in Indian languages. And people like Dr. P.J. Narayanan and I have been kind of telling the government that we need to do this, and there is a lot of interest in doing it, but getting there requires a significant commitment. And by commitment, I mean, it cannot be something you can simply start something and then go away, because that's what happens, because officials come and officials go. The next person comes who doesn't have the same commitment. It has to be made into a mission, just like we did in the space mission, where these things are actually national level missions, which continue for 10, 15, 20 years. Our space program was started by Dr. Dhawan of Indian Institute of Science almost 40 years ago, and it continues. And there's a guaranteed thing, and we need similar solutions for rural healthcare or rural language voice assistants, Indian language voice assistants.